In this update, we're tracking a powerful storm system that's beginning to take shape and gain intensity. Plus, we're looking at some of the teleconnections and the extended range and what that may look like as we head towards Christmas. So here's the setup this morning on the 500 millibar. We're still dealing with that predominant ridge that's been mainly prevalent off the west coast. That's still going to be there. But in the middle of the country, we've been looking at some of these cold fronts. It's been coming down from Canada with that cross-polar flow every couple of days. And yet we have another system ahead of a strong cold front that's bringing definitely some colder anomalies all the way down into the deep south. But that's also bringing a strong cold front that's moving across the east. That's going to be the culprit of a developing low pressure center that's going to be forming over the Great Lakes. That's going to connect with another low pressure system that's going to ride up the East Coast, bringing some very heavy winds, some very heavy rain, and some snow on the backside of the system. We take a look at the satellite picture this morning. You can definitely see it's starting to get its act together as it's providing that lift out ahead of it, and we're starting to see some showers and thunderstorms starting to develop in and around Mississippi, those areas across Alabama, back into the Georgia region. We're also seeing some beneficial rains up there into Maine, some of those areas into Vermont, New Hampshire, as well as in Connecticut and Rhode Island. And I think that's just the beginning of what's to come with yet another system that's going to be heading your way. So we do have some strong to severe storms later on this afternoon. Some of those could actually turn tornadic, where they did in fact upgrade to a slight risk for severe storms. So we could have some 65-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Can't roll out an isolated tornado or two within this area, and some isolated larger hail is definitely not out of the question. But some of those storms are going to be strong and severe if you live in the New Orleans region, back into Mobile, extending to the Montgomery region, as well as into Alabama, get down further south into Tallahassee. And I think that just continues up the East Coast as we head into your day on Wednesday. It's mainly an East Coast threat right along the coastal areas. So if you live along the coast around the Charleston region, back into Columbia, those areas into Wilmington, Raleigh, back into Norfolk, into the DC region, extending all the way into New York City, getting into Providence, Rhode Island, back into Boston. Yes, they do have a kind of a high wind watch up across that region on the southern portions of Maine. Some of these winds could be cranking easily 60 miles an hour as we head into tomorrow. We've got some isolated flash flood watches. And of course, the lake effect snow is still going to be alive and prevalent along the Great Lakes. And further south, that light blue there, that is in a freeze watch. So yes, you can definitely see that colder air continues further south, the furthest south that we've seen it so far this season, with those freeze watches extending all the way down into the deep south of Texas. So as we head into tomorrow, and I think, once we get into tomorrow timeframe, that low pressure center is really going to be developing, and we're going to may having more of a double barrel low as this low pressure comes off the east coast of the southeast. And then we have another low pressure forming out ahead of it into the Great Lakes. Those are going to combine up the east coast, bringing definitely some very heavy rain and some of those higher wind gusts approaching 50, 60, can't even roll out some 70-mile-per-hour wind gust along this region. But there's the colder air. So we've got the cross-polar flow continue to be alive and prevalent. Another quick shot of cold air coming down from Canada. We've seen this time and time again as we've started December, and we're seeing yet another cold shot that extends all the way down to the deep south. We do warm up out ahead of it. That's going to fuel these showers and thunderstorms. That's why we do have some severity to these thunderstorms, and it's going to be all rain, especially if you live along the East Coast. But we could be looking at some multi-inch totals. It's definitely not out of the question, especially with those darker greens starting to set up. So as we head into tonight, into later on this afternoon, into the overnight hours, we're going to be starting to see more widespread showers and thunderstorms. They're already getting its act together. I think that will only intensify as we get throughout the day, but with likely very heavy rain, good 1 to 2 inch totals coming up across central Alabama, central Georgia, back into the Atlanta region, those areas into the Carolinas, and that just extends all the way into Virginia, North Carolina, getting into Pennsylvania. up along the East Coast. And of course, you got the snow with the winter weather advisories and the winter storm watches up there along the Great Lakes, with more heavy lake effect snow coming on the backside of this system. And I think it continues to intensify. Now we're talking down to a 988 millibar by the time we head into Wednesday. So this would be tomorrow afternoon, getting into tomorrow evening, especially right along the coast. If you live in the coastal regions, that's where you could be seeing some of those damaging winds, likely some power outages in along this region, and extending from that 1 to possibly 3 inch totals as far as rain goes. But then the snow comes on the backside through Wisconsin, back into Michigan, those areas across the Great Lakes, and kind of a wet, sloppy snow. There's into western Pennsylvania, western New York, as this system will be coming in on the backside of this system. But the winds are going to be cranking in a big way as this low pressure center continues to intensify, riding up the East Coast. It's kind of like a nor'easter in a way, with especially if you live into the Delaware region, into New Jersey, getting into in Long Island there, into Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. Yeah, some of those areas in Providence. Yeah, we're talking 60, 65, maybe even some 70-mile-per-hour wind gust off the Nantucket region, getting into southern portions of Maine. That's where we do have some of those high wind watches in place at currently right now. And some areas could be dealing with some power outages, especially as we get during the daytime tomorrow. But what does rainfall look like with this system? Kind of looks like this, with a good 1 to 3 inch swath of heavy rain, especially where you see these deeper, darker reds. Now this area definitely needs the rain, especially up into the East Coast. So this will be a good soaking, a good 2 to 3, if not some isolated areas of 4 inch rain amounts, with precipitation unloading across this region. And some of that could change over to snow, especially further inland you live, and of course further into the Great Lakes, some of those heavy lake effect snow. But the cross polar flow has just been alive and prevalent all month of December, and yet we have another shot of colder air. Bitter cold air comes down from Canada, and yeah, we're looking at some pretty significant wind chill factors, so well below zero up there into the Dakotas, back into Minnesota, through Wisconsin. Negative numbers extend all the way into the Chicago region. As you wake up on Thursday morning, feels like 8 below zero there in Chicago. So it's going to be kind of bone-chilling cold with that other shot of Arctic air coming in from southern Canada. It's a quick hit, though. It's a very quick hit of Arctic air, and of course it modifies the further south you live. But by the time we head into Friday, I think that jet stream will start to buckle. And as it does, it's going to lift some of that polar air and lift it back up into Canada, while I'll be watching the West Coast. And this is going to be a pretty extended warm up. And I think that's coming in a big way as more of the southern branch of the jet stream is starting to kind of take over, especially as the polar jet will start to retreat and lift back up into Canada. We'll have another system that's coming in off the Pacific Northwest that's bringing more rain for them and to northern California. But we don't really have much colder air, especially coming in from the west, where the ridge has been alive and prevalent, especially if you start breaking down some of these teleconnections in the extended range. And now here's your P&A, which has been predominantly positive for pretty much the entire month of December. And I think it stays positive for really the next week or two. So that just basically implies that ridge has been locked over that region, and the much warmer anomalies will likely stay there for an extended period of time, not just for the rest of this week, but likely all into next week as well, with that P&A going positive and remaining positive. Now look at the EPO. We do see that dip. That's why we're seeing that another cross polar flow, the cold air extending all the way down into the deep south. It does start to retreat, but notice it buckles again, not as deep as this one, but it does buckle again, meaning by the time we possibly get to, say, the 18th of the month of December, we could have another colder shot of air coming down from Canada again, back into the central U.S., into that cross-polar area that's been getting that colder air. I think we have another shot possibly going into that December the 18th time frame. And the NAO kind of, more or less mediocre. We've got the plunge southbound that we're looking at right now, it definitely retreats. So there's definitely going to be a definite noticeable warm up in a big way. We're just looking for a little bit, another dip in the jet stream as we head towards that December the 18th. That would be like a week away from now. And the WPO remains pretty much flat to neutral, so there's not much going on there. And then we have the AO, which also implies around the 18th of December, after a warm up that we're going to be going through the next week, another colder shot of air that's going to be coming down from Canada, but will likely bring the coldest temperatures again remaining for the Great Lakes into those areas, into the Ohio Valley, and modifying as you get further south you go. So if you kind of looks like this, after we've got that cooler shot of air that's plunging southbound this afternoon, we'll have some colder temperatures all the way down to the deep south, the freeze line extending into the deep south. But by the time we head into Thursday and especially into Friday, we'll have that polar jet start to retreat and lift back up. We'll have more of a Pacific flow, more of a zonal flow coming on off the Pacific, as more of that ridging will start to, kind of share those warmer anomalies with the central U.S., and keeping the colder air mainly predominantly into the Great Lakes and through the Ohio Valley. And if we extend it even further than that, again, it's pretty much the West Coast continues to remain kind of high, on more ridging implying over that region. So it doesn't look like a cool down's coming anytime soon. And the same areas that have been getting the cool down, there's that shot of colder air that's possibly going into that 18th time frame, extending into that cross-polar flow and keeping the coldest anomalies along the East Coast and up the eastern seaboard and into the Northeast. And that's exactly what the Climate Prediction Center has as well, as we're going into that time frame leading up to your Christmas. The ridging is going to be alive and prevalent with that positive P&A. That's not going anywhere, I don't think. We'll likely have another shot of colder air modifying as we go further south, but keeping the colder shot and the colder anomalies off the East Coast all the way down in the Southeast. It's been a very chilly, month for Florida, and I think that likely is going to continue after a rebound coming up this week. We'll have another colder shot coming in as we head towards that Christmas time frame. So it definitely looks like there's definitely some warmer conditions on the way for the next week after we have this cold shot. And then we'll have another cold shot as we head towards that December the 18th time frame. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update where I protect you before and after the storm.